Hi guys, I'm Mike and this is F1 Fanatics. Hi guys, welcome back to a special episode today. So we're kind of celebrating the fact that Mercedes have been the first team in the history of F1 to win 6 constructors titles and 6 drivers title, with Lewis Hamilton securing the title last Sunday in the US Grand Prix. And yeah, it's an amazing achievement that they've done it in history. And to go through this debate, to ask the question, are Mercedes the best F1 team or F1 constructor team in modern F1, I have Jordan and Lyle from the F1 Debate Show. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Yeah,
great.
Thank you very much for coming on and having, well, as always, we just like getting together and chatting F1. So this is a good one, I think, juicy one to get our teeth in. So a bit of kind of background for people of what we'll be looking at. So obviously we were discussing pre-camera and off this, like going, it would be difficult to kind of compare any constructors in the entire history of F1 because of how the sport's changed over years. So we're kind of going from a period of modern F1 of when McLaren dominated in the 80s from 1988 to 91 and then forward on from that point. So then we get Williams in the 90s, Ferrari in the early 2000s, Red Bull in the early 2010s, then obviously Mercedes dominance from 2014 to date. So I'm going to switch over to the F1 Debate Show boys up next. Who wants to go first in terms of pitching their arguments for how they've been a successful team in F1 history?
Jordan can go first.
There you go. Good pass in the butt, Lyle. Give you a chance to listen.
Yeah, I'll start. Well, it's certainly a very interesting question, isn't it, about Mercedes, because what they've achieved in, let's face it, a very short space of time. You know, they've won 6 and 6, the first team to ever do that in Formula One. It's an absolutely incredible achievement. And let's not forget that they have been through, 2 regulation changes in that space of time, and they're still at the top, still maintaining, over 100 wins now in Formula One. I think they're the fourth on the all-time list, I believe, on 101 after they took the victory in the US as we are recording this. So, it's been absolutely an incredible run from the guys from Brackley. But going back to the days of McLaren, Williams in the 80s and 90s, Formula One then was just it's always been evolving in a way where it is kind of hard to keep up in in those days of Formula One. So for example, like in the 80s you had obviously the days of Prost and Senna and stuff, and obviously engines changing, chassis and everything changes. Well, into the 90s as well, because Formula One at the time was still dangerous. Obviously, they were still testing safety features and stuff. So it was a challenge for teams to go in every season trying to make the sport safe, make the car safer. Like, more technology was coming in the 90s, so they had to keep up with that. And then, of course, you had Williams in 92 had the active suspension, which was revolutionary. I think that's one of the reasons why Senna wanted to go to Williams. McLaren were the team in 91, then Williams took over in 92, and then dominated onwards because of technology. Technology has been a big part of Formula One, probably since, I would say, the start of the 90s. That's when it really took a hold, and not until the FIA banned active suspension for the Williams, and that's when. But even then, they won the next 2 years, 93, 94, and then again 96, 97. So it wasn't just the active suspension; it was just the team as a whole. It was incredible to maintain that. But then in 98, they just crumbled, didn't they? Then McLaren took over from there. McLaren took the baton back in 98, but of course sadly didn't win it in 99. But even then, McLaren had already had their success in the 80s and 90s. They just weren't ahead in the technology game as far as what Williams were. And then you switch over to Ferrari, when Ferrari was a team. They were a sleeping giant, weren't they? They hadn't won a championship. This is 99. They hadn't won a championship since 83. And a team like Ferrari, they were.
I believe it was as far back as 79 with Jody Schleckler, actually, the South African guy. I think it was even further back, another 4 years on top of that. So yeah, it was a massive long distance before they won.
Oh yeah, exactly. So, and even then, though, a team like Ferrari, they needed they needed something as well because they were becoming a bit of a laughing stock. They were close in some years, but I mean, even in 90, what year did Schumacher get? Was it disqualified? Was it 97? Schumacher got disqualified from the season.
I think it was 97.
97 when he hit Villeneuve.
Because wasn't that the one? Yeah, he charged into Villeneuve, and Villeneuve won his one and only world title.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, good achievement from him. But
been living off it ever since.
Exactly. And then, but Schumacher had been there since 96. Yes, 96, I think. So, and he was building a team around him. He was getting people in. And Schumacher and Ferrari did it totally differently. Like, all right, technology was still a key thing, but still, you had a really good driver. You had really good engineers. You had a brilliant team around him. And then it took a hold in 1999. They won the first constructors since, what was it, 82, 83, I think, the constructors. But even then, they hadn't won a driver's title, like you said, since 79. So, and then in 2000, it took a hold, and then they just dominated. And again, nobody came close. Well, McLaren did in some years, but even then, 2000, 2001, 2002, they were unstoppable. 2003, all right, McLaren were close, but still, Ferrari were ahead of the game. 2004, untouchable, absolutely untouchable. They were finally beaten in 2005 by Alonso and Renault, which was probably a shock. I think Ferrari had a bit of a shocking season, a bit of like a little bit of an improvement in 06. But even in that transition of time, Ferrari had their success and they were still chasing it. They were still, I mean, the one in 07 and 8 with in the constructors, Raikkonen winning the championship, and of course Hamilton winning it in 08. Massa was the champion for like 30 seconds, wasn't he? And that was like the end of Ferrari's dominance. Well, the Ferrari era, really, when the regulations changed for 2009, Brawn took a hold. Red Bull were then the next team. Really, once the cars went from being this these short kind of really quick cars to these long stumpy weird looking things. In 09, they didn't look like racing cars, but still, Red Bull took a hold of that, and then they were at the top. Nobody could touch them. They had their rough moments, and that consistency was great. And then you jump onto Mercedes. Mercedes took a hold of the engine regulations in 2014. They were the only ones to really succeed in it. Renault fell, Honda fell, and Ferrari fell even further. So, well, not as far as Honda, but there was no one that could touch Mercedes. And even then, even today, nobody can touch Mercedes now. No one's even come close. A team has always had that one year where someone will come close to them and almost beat them. But recently with Mercedes, if someone gets close to them, that team just slips up. And obviously we know who that team is. And like you just think, well, in 2020, I can't see Ferrari nor Red Bull coming close again. And that just proves how good the team is, because they're using their facilities and their technology to the very best that they possibly can. They've got a brilliant driver in Hamilton and a good number 2 driver in Bottas, controversial, but still, though, Bottas is a good driver. And even when they had Rosberg was similar, quite good. So, I think, in my opinion, after saying all of that, going through two regulations, keeping the same keeping the same level, maintaining the same reliability, they never had really any teething problems throughout the course of their dominant era. I've got to say it's Mercedes. I really have to. And I'm not a Mercedes fan, just saying that. But definitely has to be Mercedes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And Lyle, over to you.
Yeah, well, there we go. I mean, kind of the history of Formula 1 by Jordan there. So I just want to touch on quickly what he said about, the 80s and 90s. There was, what you hear a lot in sport is the marginal gains. They were always quite, a lot of the athletes were all spread out, back in those days. Not just Formula 1, a lot of sports as well. Back there, there was Nigel Mansell for Williams, Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, for Williams and McLaren, things like that. And they were all spread out, and there was a big gap between the drivers and the teams and who could really, come close. And Formula 1 has been kind of a dip and a rise between both of those things. There's been marginal gains where the teams have been so tight where there's actually not been a dominant force really in the gaps, where there hasn't been like a dominating team like Ferrari or something. But then there's also been ones where, as I say, like Ferrari, they've been able to kind of capitalise on the massive gap that they have over the other teams, over the competitors. Ferrari, I mean, they had some great drivers. Mainly Michael Schumacher was, at the helm, obviously, when he brought them through the big era. Those battling people like Mick Hakkinen and McLaren. But, they were just an amazing team, got everything right. But the thing that got me about Ferrari back then was, they'd been in Formula 1 since, the start of Formula 1. A pure Italian name, a name that was, fixated on for Formula 1. For them to dominate in Formula 1 was kind of like, it was like their time, finally. We'd waited such a long time for them to dominate, and even though they'd won championships before, obviously through all of the eras, quite consistent in that way, that they had won a championship at every decade, and they had multiple drives and things like that. This was the first time Ferrari were finally, back on top, probably since like the Ascari days and stuff like that. So I'm not a massive, follower of that team, but to wait that long, 40 odd 50 years since Formula 1 actually started to dominate that much, it's kind of like a bit of a sigh of relief. But I wouldn't say it was a massive shock. Obviously, Michael winning, was great for them. Obviously, Michael Schumacher fan and things like that. And what he's actually done, 7 world championships, or let's say 5 world championships for him. Obviously, 2 with Benetton back in the day, and obviously 6 consecutive for Ferrari. It was amazing, but it was kind of like a sigh of relief for that team to go forward. And, it was really, to go through that era, as I say, when John said, when people like McLaren and Renault just couldn't catch up, it just showed how amazing that team actually was. Everything bonded together, made them such a strong team. And without that, I don't think Ferrari would be as strong as they are right now. But saying that, Ferrari still aren't, back to those days. They always say that they're going to be back to them days, but, they're still a long way off. And then after that, after Ferrari dominated in 2005, it kind of dipped back down again, where there was those kind of marginal gains where all the teams are, scratching their heads trying to catch up. You had obviously the Renault domination of Fernando Alonso, but even then, McLaren was still creeping up, Ferrari was still creeping up, Renault, I've already said Renault, and then obviously Red Bull were back in the fight, things like that. And then of course I switched back on to Red Bull, which I'm going to kind of elaborate on a little bit about the team. Obviously Red Bull is, my team. They came into Formula 1 and, a few years obviously sticking around. They came in 2005. Toro Rosso came in the next year. They own Toro Rosso, the Italian version of Red Bull, but a kind of an energy drink company that never really had anything to do with Formula 1 before. They were just trying their luck. Obviously, they were involved in the motor racing scene, they were involved in the air racing scene, and different sponsorships and different sporting events all around the world. So for them to enter Formula 1, it was kind of like a new path into the sport. They took over from Jaguar. But it was kind of very unique because nothing like that had ever been done before. There had been sponsors in Formula 1 before, but it was mainly motorsport companies. Ford and things like that had come in and come out again. Red Bull were kind of a very niche one. This was an energy drink company that weren't just sponsoring a team. They were actually in a team. You had Red Bull as the main name of the car, not just a sponsor. Then they had a few years of just kind of kicking around. I tell you what, we'll enter Formula 1. We'll have a bit of fun with it. We're in everything else. We're doing the air race and things like that. We'll just have a bit of fun with it. Then obviously comes along 2008 when Sebastian Vettel wins his race with Toro Rosso. As I say, the feeder team to Red Bull, but still very much a Red Bull team. It has the Red Bull livery. It's owned by the same guy, Dietrich Mateschitz from Austria. It's just obviously more of an Italian team, more of a spin-off team, and kind of a junior team. So Red Bull have already invested in a junior team. That's how much they're invested in Formula 1. And then they started taking this more seriously. More money went into the brand, more money went to Dietrich Mateschitz, more money went into the base in Austria. They set up the brand in Milton Keynes, and that's when they finally became, a proper, a serious constructor. And then obviously after that, the regulations changed from obviously after 2009's Braun, after their domination, which by the way, let's just quickly say, I know we're talking about successful teams, but we can't get away from the fact that Braun, they've only won once, but they were only in Formula 1 year. So do you know what that successful rate means in percentages, Jordan and Mike? How successful were for Braun in 1 year to win 1 championship? What does that mean in percentages? How successful were they?
100%.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So there we.
I can confer it's 100%. Yes.
Yeah. So there we go. Right. There we go. Braun are the best team. Let's end it there. No, not really. So we're talking about the best team, but I'm just gonna quickly throw that out there. Braun 100%. So you can't actually get away from the fact that Braun were a good team. Only 1 season, but they won once. 100%. So yeah, anyway, so Braun, they finished their domination, regulations changed, back to the V8, and it was more simpler times that Red Bull just were able to capitalise on that. They had 4 world championships, constructors and drivers. 2 good drivers, obviously Sebastian, really good driver back then, had a great start, but obviously we all see what he's like now, so maybe you can't say he was the best driver and he was the sole reason that Red Bull won the championships. But Red Bull, the main thing that you have to think about Red Bull is, remember, they're not a Ferrari. I've just been saying about Ferrari, when they won their 6 back in the early 21st century, sorry. When they won back then, that was a pure motorsport brand. Red Bull were not. They're an energy drink company. They're a company that, you will buy a drink down at the shops. They're not really anything to do with Formula 1, but they've been in Formula 1 for 9 years, for 8 years after 2013. They were in Formula 1 for 8 years, and they already have 4 consecutive World Championships with a hell of a lot of wins, and it's absolutely insane from a team that, as I just said there, has no real connection to Formula 1. And then we enter 2014, obviously bad year from them when the regulations changed, but then, for me and other people, you sat there scratching your head, you're thinking, how have Red Bull done that? They're an energy drink company, and they've just won 4 World Championships. And that's what I think makes them an amazing constructor. And then obviously it goes along Mercedes, domination again, not going to get into too much because, they've just won the 100th race, 6 times for Lewis, 6 times for the team as well. Lewis just wraps it up this last weekend in the USA. Mercedes get it 3 weeks ago in Japan. But again, Mercedes, going back to the Ferrari, Mercedes are a motorsport brand. They've been in Formula 1 before. Obviously, they took a massive gap in between. But for them to be back on top, it's not as big as Ferrari, I wouldn't say, in terms of the name and the brand, because Ferrari are obviously more of a passionate Formula 1 name. When you think of Formula 1, you think of Ferrari. When you think of Formula 1, you think of Mercedes only now. But 20 odd years ago, you probably wouldn't have done that. And of course, you never, ever, ever would have said Red Bull as, you never would have said Formula 1 and then instantly thought of Red Bull back in the 80s, because I don't even know if the energy drink was there in the 80s. So with all that said, I would say that, Red Bull, obviously my team, I would love to say they were the best team in modern day Formula 1, but obviously they're not there now, so you can't say that. They haven't been able to capitalise on the V6s at all. They haven't been able to go back to what they once were, but even back in the V8, I still wouldn't say that they were the best team in modern day Formula 1. I'm going to say Mercedes are, and I'm going to agree with that statement, and I know off camera I said not, but I'm going to go and say yes. The reason I'm saying yes is, again, because I've kind of capitalised myself when I'm talking, because I've just been saying there, Ferrari, when they were dominating, we needed that back. We needed the name. We need Ferrari in Formula 1. We needed Ferrari back on top. We didn't really need Red Bull because they just came in and did their thing. A bit like Brawn, didn't really need Brawn because a year before Brawn existed, they didn't exist, so we didn't even know about them. Renault, obviously again they never really had a hold in Formula 1. Mercedes though, back dominating, but they were in Formula 1 before, and they had a pedigree and they had a legacy, and of course they had world champions in Formula 1, e.g. about Fangio, obviously back in the the godfather of Formula 1, obviously back in the very early 50s when Formula 1 was starting out. So with all that, Mercedes does have a pedigree in Formula 1. They have been able to kind of alight that the pedigree back in Formula 1, and that's why I do think that they are the best team in modern day Formula 1. But just quickly what I was saying off camera. Remember, it has only been, it has been 2 regulation changes. Obviously, they did change in 2016 because of the change to the car. But in terms of the engines, they haven't. The not amount of change in 2021, even though that is a regulation change Mercedes will need to get right. So again, is it just that teams can only come in and dominate in one kind of engine change? Ferraris were, in the V10s, and then Red Bull in the V8s, and now Mercedes in the V6s. So when it changes to, I don't know what we can change to again, the flat 4s, the V10 turbos, I don't know, but when there's another regulation change in terms of the engines, is that when we can see another team come forward? Or will Mercedes be able to dominate in another change? So after 2021, I'm going to throw this back to Mike, after 2021, regulations change yet again. If Mercedes fall off their dominance, will this conversation change from Mercedes aren't the best because they haven't been able to capitalise on the what they are right now to the regulations changing in 2 years' time?
I suppose then I'll work my way backwards from Mercedes and then work my way back to the 80s. So I'll go back to the future in that type of element there. I think, if you even consider that they win next year up until 2021 and say they win both constructors and drivers titles, that would be 7 constructors and drivers titles consecutively, which will then be 2 clear of anyone previously to that, because obviously Ferrari only won 5 back-to-back constructors and drivers titles. So I think regardless of not going through regulation changes, to just have the ability and efficiency of the team to keep winning relentlessly in that period, I think it just makes them the best in that aspect. Yeah, for me, efficiency is the word that I would use to describe Mercedes. They've just managed to get all the right cogs in the machine and they just run so smoothly. And they might have had just kind of a slightly jaggedy cog in Rosberg, not because he wasn't a good driver, but just in terms of the relationship that was for Hamilton. I think very much if he hadn't retired, there might have been a way of them pushing him out the team, because I don't think the team themselves or the drivers could be coping with another season of how they kind of competed against each other. And they've kind of refined that machine. They've found Valtteri Bottas, who is still, like Jordan said, a good driver. He kind of suits Hamilton so well. They get on. There's no inter-team rivalry or any aspect on that front. And yeah, it's just kind of, it's impossible not to kind of admire the team that they've built in there. Going back to Red Bull, I agree. Red Bull were a team who don't have F1 pedigree, and to go from 2006 to 2010, so only being 5 years within the sport, and then winning their championship within that, and then going on a 4 years dominance, and if we're honest with you, in the right circumstances, if they'd already shown pedigree in 2009 in getting it right, to even be the closest title challenger in 2009 and then to go and dominate the sport is a mightily impressive thing. Yes, they had money, but no way did they have the backing that Mercedes and Ferrari have had in their times of dominance. So that is a massive achievement in itself. And obviously Sebastian Vettel being so young and being able to win the titles as young as it is, because you've got to remember, although Fernando Alonso was in the third best car on the grid, he's still beaten a double world champion, and I would say 2010 to 2013 was probably the prime of Fernando Alonso in terms of his driving career, and to hold him off in the last race. So yeah, 2010 and 2012, obviously that can't be understated, that a young Sebastian Vettel beating two-time champion Fernando Alonso, who may not have the world titles that puts him in the greats of the drivers, but certainly is a great challenge, and for Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel to both beat him, massive achievements in their careers. But yeah, no, Red Bull, really smart team in terms of being able to recruit the top guys and really make smart decisions in their recruitment that has allowed them to compete with Ferrari and Mercedes.
Just when you were saying there, Mike, just quickly about Red Bull, obviously, yeah, they've got Adrian Newey, fantastic from them. Christian Horner, kind of a bit of a diamond in the rough, you know. Again, he wasn't really known, and then now he's turned into this amazing guy who ran the team. So you mentioned, obviously, the two drivers, Sebastian Vettel. You mentioned how well they did, but the two drivers that they had, Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber, how much would you say that they kind of affected the team? Because obviously you've just said there also that, you know, Sebastian Vettel 2 times he was, you know, very close to Fernando Alonso, but then 2 times he wasn't. So 2010, 2012, very close. The marginal gains were very, you know, they were very small. As in, you know, Ferrari were kind of edging close to Red Bull, and they could have taken it almost at the last minute. And then obviously 2011, 2013, that's when Red Bull were dominant. But all 4 times the constructor was wrapped up and there was no challenge. So how much do you think those 2 drivers helped? Because Mark Webber, he's a very strange driver, because we've talked about him before, because I've just said there, you know, 4 times Red Bull have, you know, dominated the constructors. No challenge from Ferrari whatsoever, but Red Bull only twice really dominated the World Championship. Twice were kind of under threat, but all 4 times was Sebastian and never Mark. So how much did those 2 drivers helped? And also, kind of, where's the percentages of, you know, how much was Seb and how much was Mark? And then how would you kind of compare that to, you know, how much is Lewis and how much is Valtteri? And then also how much is Rosberg, as you could say, in 2016 in Mercedes?
Well, yeah, I would probably compare a lot the Sebastian and Webber rivalry to the Rosberg and Hamilton ones, in terms of Mark Webber probably could have, in the right circumstances, if things fell his way, obviously it's fine margins in Formula 1, have won in 2010, that first season with Red Bull winning the constructors and driver title for the first time. I think it was South Korea, wasn't it, where Vettel crashed out in the rain? Sorry, not Vettel,
Yeah.
Webber crashed out in the rain.
Webber, yeah. But that's where he effectively lost it. Yeah.
Exactly, and then obviously Rosberg had the season, did very well in 2016, but obviously Hamilton was plagued by reliability issues. So I think that maybe hindered Red Bull in terms of dominating from within, because obviously they had to deal with the fractured relationship, and maybe I think Christian Horner has spoken about it in terms of not being able. If anything, he should have maybe got rid of Mark, which would have been harsh, sooner, with that internal conflict, where Mercedes have been more efficient and they saw Rosberg as, I mean, I know he retired. Be interesting what you guys think. I think he retired because he knew that the team couldn't go on doing that, and he's got his world title, so that's something that people can never take away from Nico Rosberg now.
Yeah.
But that team couldn't keep functioning how it did, and they've progressed, they've evolved, and that's how they got Valtteri.
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of when Rosberg retired, my view is that it was his decision. I don't think he even spoke to Mercedes, but one thing that we've always talked about, me and Jordan, was the kind of... Okay, so Red Bull obviously amazing. You know, I'm not going to harsh them, but the one thing that they never really got was how they built the team. And again, they're kind of going back to a little bit of it now. So back then, it was all about Sebastian. The team was built around Sebastian, and if he said the team jump, they would say how high, and if Mark said jump, they would all say, "Oh, get lost." And it was just. I mean, I know it sounds strange because Sebastian was the 1-time world champion, 2-time world champion, 3-time world champion, and 4-time world champion. But yeah, and obviously Mark was none of those things. But it was strange, and that's where it fell apart. Sebastian was a bit immature, and they didn't really get on very well. But the team didn't help that. And then obviously that's where the unstructured relationship was, and that led to Mark Webber retiring at the end of 2013 because Mark was not done in Formula One. I don't know how old he was, mid-30s, but he just wasn't done with racing. And obviously that's why he entered Porsche and things like that. And he's commentating now. He's not done. I still think Mark Webber had a good 5, 6, 7, 6 years, let's say, left in his Formula 1 status left. With Rosberg leaving, I don't think that the team was just solely built around Hamilton. I think that the team were quite fair between Hamilton and Rosberg. But I think he was thinking that the team were kind of going to be kind of edging towards building it around Hamilton. They were going to go towards what it was like in the Red Bull days, and of course Rosberg's kind of I think he kind of took note of what happened to Webber a little bit more. That Hamilton was number one driver, a bit like Sebastian Vettel was. Mark Webber, Rosberg was turned into a little bit like Mark Webber. He had to fight for even one world championship. Thankfully Rosberg got it, but then he was noticing that the team was about to become a Hamilton based. It was becoming Hamilton AMG Petronas, not Mercedes AMG Petronas anymore. And then I think Rosberg, on his own accord, decided to leave because yes, obviously he had his one world championship. He was happy with that. He had been in Formula 1 for about 6 years or something like that. At that point, he was a family man. Obviously, he just had his baby at home. He just got recently married, so he wanted to kind of retire and focus on that. But a little bit of it, just a little bit, was because he realised that the team were becoming more of a Hamilton team, and he didn't want to see what happened at Red Bull, happen at Mercedes, because obviously going forward he would not have liked that. He was falling apart with Hamilton a little bit, obviously, for example, colliding in Spain and obviously what had happened, in the previous years. But he just didn't want to see that happen. So he would rather jump before he was pushed. But as I say, I think there was more dignity than obviously what happened to Webber, unfortunately, at Red Bull. Because obviously, even though Red Bull were a great team, that was probably one of their only kind of, the thing that they had done wrong. And I just mentioned there quickly about, they're reverting back to that. Because now with Verstappen, they kind of are. They're neglecting their second driver. And whatever Verstappen wants, if Verstappen says jump, the team will say how high. And unfortunately, they're going back to that. But obviously it was more prevalent back in Sebastian and Mark's days. So Jordan, just answering what Mike's question there about Nico Rosberg, why did he retire, and how was the kind of organisation of the team between Hamilton and Rosberg? What would you say led to Rosberg's retirement? Do you think it was right? Then obviously, how do you think that kind of led to the structure between Hamilton and Valtteri going forward?
I think Rosberg did retire because he knew that how hard it is to compete with Lewis Hamilton. Like, he lost out in 14, very unlucky to do so. 15, it just wasn't his year. 16, he started off the season really good. He won 3 races at the end of 15, 4 races in 16, and he got the edge over Hamilton, and that's what he needed to do. He had to do it early because he couldn't do it mid-season because Hamilton by then would have been second anyway if Rosberg was first. So Rosberg knew that he'd beaten Hamilton, the second guy to do that in the history in Hamilton's career. The other one being Button in 2011. So he had done something that only one other person has done before. And you're like, well, I'm a world champion. Rosberg's been in the sport for 10 years at this stage. So all these things as well, and he's got his family as well. So he's like, I may as well go on a high, not defend the title and not do it again. Because if let's say he stayed in 17 and he crumbled and he was finishing like, let's say he did a Valtteri 18 where Valtteri just wasn't on the pace at all. Then everyone would just then doubt Rosberg's ability, because it wasn't until Rosberg retired I respected Rosberg, because I was like, you know what, he did push Hamilton. He pushed him a lot further than anyone else has when Bottas joined. That's no disrespect against Bottas, but Bottas only won 3 races. He didn't push Hamilton all the way. Bottas was never in the title fight, well, for a bit anyway. Vettel was always there to beat Hamilton, but he didn't, of course. So in Rosberg, and at the time as well, if you going back between those years in 14, 15 and 16, Rosberg was in a very good situation that he was in a team that could win championships. So when he knew that, he was like, right, I must win a championship, because at the end of the day, that's what they're there for. They're there to win races. They're there to be world champion. It doesn't matter who you drive for, whether that's for the top teams, midfield teams, or the back markers. You're there to be world champion. That's it. And you'll do anything. You do anything you can to achieve that. Whether that's sitting at the back of the grid for 10 years just to get that one season where, right, okay, this is my moment. And Rosberg was like that. Rosberg was slumming it in Williams, went to Mercedes, took a risk, it paid off, won in 12, and then eventually, right, this is my moment in 14, I've got to take it. But at the end of the day, there's only one can be world champion. Not 2, not 3, 1. And when you've got 2 drivers who are battling the world championship in the standings, tensions will boil over. And I think what also makes a team great is how you manage those 2 drivers. It did boil over at Mercedes. I think it shouldn't have in some situations. I think Spain 16 was the pinnacle, was probably the last straw in the whole, right, okay guys, this, you can't be doing this, because they probably would have sacked one of them, and I think I know who that person would have been Rosberg. If they had the choice to sack one of them drivers on that day, it would have been Rosberg, definitely, because Hamilton, in terms of the merchandise and financial aspect of things, you couldn't sack him. But and Mercedes did end up managing quite well, and that's probably when Rosberg was like, right, I'll go. Valtteri comes into the helm, and straight away Valtteri, well, first of all, he's Finnish. He's from Finland, and they aren't really that bothered about things like that. They don't make a lot of noise to do the Finns. So Mercedes knew what kind of a driver that they had on their hands, going, right, okay, he's quick, but we aren't going to be in a Rosberg situation. And I think Mercedes straight away dealt with that quickly, going, right, okay, Valtteri, you might have to be sacrificed in some races. Because imagine if Rosberg was told that, okay, Rosberg, it's James, you have to move over. Straight away, no, I'm not doing it. I mean, the incident in Malaysia 13, Rosberg did what he was told, but there was a lot of verbal things going on the team radio then, and I know that was only round 2 in the second race of those 2 being teammates, but that's how early it went. So, and Mercedes did manage it well in some situations, in some situations they didn't. But when Bottas came in, like I said, they said, right, okay, we can't have a Bottas situation again. Sorry, a Rosberg situation again with Bottas. So, and that's what they did. And that's what I said. That's how good it was within the Mercedes camp, that they kept those 2 drivers. Like, okay, you will work his team, you will work his teammates, because probably if Hamilton wasn't happy at the same time, you probably would have went, well, I've done this with Rosberg, I'm doing this with Bottas, I'm going. And like I said, Mercedes can't afford to lose a driver like Hamilton, especially in the prime that he's in. So, and it was probably a similar situation with Red Bull, because you had this young guy in Vettel, who everyone was tipping to be the next big driver. He'd been in the Red Bull Academy before. Mark was similar to Rosberg. Mark was a driver where he hadn't really been at the front. He was with Minardi, Williams, Jaguar, Williams, and then back to Red Bull. That's his kind of timeline. So Red Bull, I mean, even then when he joined Red Bull, they were only, just filling around in the midfield. And then in '09, it was like, right, okay, this is my moment. This is my time to shine. Let's see what I'm going to show the world what I can do. But in his way was a young German being compared to Michael Schumacher. I mean, obviously Mark being the person he is was like, no, absolutely no way. I'm not being a pushover for this guy. And that's when tensions boiled over. Red Bull tried to settle the situation. I think, to be fair, it was never going to work out. That the fact that you were never going to have those two drivers to agree to anything.
No, it was never going to work. I mean, it worked well for the team, obviously getting 4 constructors, but that was a very hard thing to manage. Yeah, when you watch interviews by like Christian Horner, the Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen battle, like managing their situation and whatever. He always says that was definitely the hardest thing. Getting 7 and Mark. The only saving grace was just because the team was new and had a little bit more, like it had a bit more youth and freshness to kind of get over that problem. But that was probably only Red Bull's like one kind of problem that they had, obviously not managing those two.
It was a big problem. I think it was a big problem because, like I said, I think Mark was probably even told, look, we're building this team around Seb, you are going to have to be number 2 driver. And like I said, Mark was arrogant. He went, no, I don't want to be number 2 driver. I haven't spent all this time going through the ranks into Formula 1, spending all this time since 2002 to try and become world champion, for nothing. So I'm not letting this young kid, in the same way what Alonso was like. Alonso was like, well, with Hamilton, like, no, I'm a 2-time world champion. I don't want to play second best to bully this guy who's been in your ranks for 12 years or whatever, or however long it was. So, and McLaren dealt with it kind of. Well, I said kind of in a way. It will always be hard to manage drivers, but you've got to do the best the best you can. And I think Mercedes are dealing with it at the moment very, very well, because like Bottas has sacrificed races. You're not going to be happy, but it just it's just how it comes across. And probably he was probably aware of the situation, right? Okay, yeah, like I said, you will have to sacrifice your races, but and I think that's, like I said, another element as to why Mercedes are such a good team. It's only going to be what does the future hold if they do stay in Formula 1, and the future is that I believe Verstappen will go to Mercedes. It's just a case of when. Is it going to be alongside Hamilton, or is it when Hamilton leaves? Because if Vettel goes, if Verstappen goes when Hamilton's there, you've got another Rosberg-Hamilton situation again. You've got another Vettel-Webber situation. That was a weird name. You've got another situation again, because Hamilton will still want to win championships, and he can still do so. But Max is the young kid who wants to win championships for the first time, have all the records. You know what Max is like, and Red Bull's the 3rd quickest team on the grid. So imagine what he's going to be like in a car where he can challenge for the championship. So let's see what the future holds for them.
I mean, I'd agree with all that, and that was a nice kind of little side tour into it. I think we're 2 of the top teams, you can say, in the kind of modern F1 with Red Bull, Mercedes, different for so many reasons. They've both overcome internal rivalries within the teams in different ways. Obviously, Mercedes have then kicked on with Valtteri and carried on their success, where Red Bull got hindered by that engine change, and obviously Renault never were able to get on top of the V6 era. A team that never could do with it were Ferrari, because Rubens Barrichello was always subservient, and Eddie Irvine was always number 2 to Michael Schumacher. The only reason he was going for the title in 1999 was obviously because Schumacher broke his leg at the British Grand Prix in that year. I think Ferrari, for me, they were just brilliant in terms of they took the best driver, they took the best team principals, the best technical guys within F1, and they put them all together in this team, and they knew it was going to be a long project, and they knew it was hard to kind of get back Ferrari, but they knew they had the funding, they knew that if they put in the hard work, they had the team behind him, and then they were just ruthless, and they got to Mercedes efficiency with that, obviously 6 constructors titles and 5 drivers titles. They're the second one for me next to Mercedes, and I think Mercedes have only taken them over just because they can keep going efficiently. And Lewis has obviously beat away Sebastian Vettel. You'd probably say the only thing that may challenge Mercedes is, have they had a major constructor seriously challenge them to the end like Ferrari did? in terms of McLaren,
really.
and I don't know. So maybe Ferrari is more impressive on that regard, would be in terms of beating there. Williams for me are the kind of romantic choice, because obviously Frank Williams is like us. He was an F1 fan first, or a motorsport fan first. Built his own team, obviously with the understanding when he realised he wasn't good enough to be a racing car driver, but built his own team from there, and just incredible. And then obviously going through winning some championships in the 80s, and then obviously building the best cars with Adrian Newey in the 90s as well, having the top drivers in F1 of that era, obviously of Senna and Prost, wanting to go to him and wanting to drive for his team, I think speaks volumes of it. The 1993 car that they produced was incredible, the one that Prost won his final championship with. And 1997, obviously Jacques Villeneuve was a good driver, and he was a great driver to win the World Championship in that year, ahead of the Ferrari. But also, I think you could have put the majority of that F1 grid that season in that 1997 car. Williams was so good at building a car and going from there, and to win 5 constructors in the 90s, so to win 50% of the championships in an era that wasn't really dominated. I know McLaren kind of did it late 80s, early 90s there, but to win kind of 50% of the championships in a decade is very impressive. And obviously Ferrari and Mercedes have managed that feat as well. And for me, McLaren, their biggest asset is they managed to kind of have 2 of the best drivers of their generation in Prost and Senna, and be successful winning with them, because obviously those guys were so bad that the fact that it got to Senna wanted to join Williams in 1993, but Prost had it written in, they'd already signed Prost, and Prost had it in his kind of contract that he wouldn't ever race with Senna in a team again because of how things were bad at McLaren. And you just go, how they still managed to win. I know obviously Prost left to the latter end of it, but how they still managed to win championships with those two crazy at each other was massively impressive as well. But I think rounding off with you guys, obviously I've gone backwards from there, but I think we all end up in the same point, which is I think the relentless efficiency of Mercedes F1 to win how they've done, and to be in terms of win percentage, they have the highest win percentage out of any team in the history of the sport. They have the highest percentage of poles in any team in the history of the sport. I think they have the highest percentage of points, kind of gap difference, than any other kind of teams within the sport history. And yes, it may come across as boring at times to people, but you can't you have to sit back and admire what an incredible job they've done. And I think for me is why they just sneak it ahead in that. And obviously you guys said Mercedes to win as well, but so yeah, there you go. We've got me, Jordan and Rahl all in agreement, Mercedes win. But so are Mercedes the best constructor in the history of the sport? Yes, they would be if you listen to us, but it'd be interesting to kind of hear guys' comments below whether you agree with us and what are your defining factors within that. I think that's probably, guys, quite a good point to round off on, in terms of I think we've all pitched it well, and Lyle obviously keeping your Red Bull roots true. I think you defended them well in terms of there, and definitely. Great chat as always, guys. And obviously these guys have just recently reached 1,000 subscribers, which is a huge achievement, and so kind of happy for those guys, and incredible. Just
it's hard to believe.
Yes, it is. But if for somehow you're watching our video and you haven't subscribed to these guys, then please do go and subscribe to them, because they're great, come out with great content. And we end up seeming to do videos all the time because we just seem to ramble on about F1 all the time. But
definitely. And also as well, just quickly, obviously, thank you for that, Mike. And also, obviously, you guys just hit 100 subscribers, and so make sure you go and subscribe to them. If you are new to this episode, obviously, thank you for subscribing to them. We've all got to start somewhere. Me and John were in this position. You know, it really means a lot, and obviously, hopefully, you, Mike, will be in our position very, very, very soon. He also did his shout out that we did challenge him to a few months ago. I think we only challenged him to because he has really excelled quite fast. Shouted out in the middle of Covent Garden in London, so go and check that if you haven't already. And obviously, yeah, just thank you for having us on. We're being quite, we like doing these collaborations, and yeah, hopefully we can keep going and obviously boost our channels. More your sort of channel as we go on.
No, but thank you so much for that, guys. Jordan, I'll let you crack on. Sorry, jump in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, just what Lyle said as well about the whole, you guys hitting 100 as well. It is still a good achievement because not many people will actually get to that, get to that feat. You have got to work hard for it, and you guys do work hard. You, Mike, Ash, you guys do work really, really hard. You do put a lot of effort in your videos, and there is plenty more to come from you guys, definitely in the future. So just keep at it, keep going, and hopefully, you might be. Yeah, I think you will be at over 1,000 one day, definitely, if you keep it up. And then who knows where the future will take you.
Thank you very much, guys, for that. I appreciate it, and thank you very much for making me embarrass myself in front of Covent Gardens with the challenge that you set as well.
No problem at all. And thank Matthew Gallagher for giving me the idea.
Exactly. Thank you. What the F1.
Even though he did his in the middle of Piccadilly Circus, and I think you chose more of a secluded area. So.
All right. Okay. Here we go. Unbelievable. Look, you're okay. Right. Here we go.
Maybe 200 will get you to do it in the middle of Parliament Square or something like that, Mike.
Well, sorry, guys. I'll let you guys top it next time in terms of going from there. But if you haven't checked out that, we did a video to say thank you for reaching 100 subs. Go and check that out because I'll reveal today in this episode the winner of the kind of 1 minute 30 second challenge in the McLaren Senna, kind of a special edition of the Amateur Lap series. Both Mike and Ash did an episode there. I beat Ash by 0.1 of a kilometre, so I'm very happy with that. Ooh. And clearly,
well done,
clearly Ash today is, he was gutted to lose, and so he wasn't ready to face the, disappointment quite yet. No, he disappointed by, unfortunately, work gets in the way with things from there. But guys, again, thank you so much, and guys, hope you've enjoyed this. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, subscribe to the channel, and for you F1 fans, remember, keep racing.